Where do people go today to learn about sex? And not just the birds and the bees. A 2015 study by Rothman found that 25% of 18 to 24-year-olds said pornography was their most helpful source of information about how to have sex. Pornography often constructs a false reality of sex, and some experts would go as far as saying it can actually ruin your sex life. Femtech is a growing technology field that aims to improve and support women's mental health, reproductive and contraceptive health, and sexual wellness. I caught up with Lilly Sparks, the founder of Afterglow, an erotic learning and sexual wellness platform. With women's sexual health and wellness now becoming less of a taboo, the fem and sex tech industries are focusing on education and the next generation. Afterglow's goal is to release some of the stigma and shame surrounding sex and pornography by making content that is actually good for you. Creating real systemic change is a continuous journey that requires us to always keep taking steps forward, no matter how big or how small. This is the work in progress.
90% of people have watched porn in the past 6 months, but it's clearly not helping them have better sex because 60% of people are dissatisfied with their sex life. At Afterglow, we really tried to create a place that has erotic videos, but it's a place people can learn from. And one of the things I think people are looking for is intimacy. Cosmo used to always have like 6 ways to please your man, but we were never taught how to please ourselves.
On your LinkedIn, I think you stated a statistic that was 50% of women don't experience orgasms during sex.
Like, how crazy is that? Like, if you talk to men, it's like, if like
100%.
100%. Like, there's another crazy stat that people were asked if they were having good sex, and it turned out that the men were defining good sex as having an orgasm, and the women were defining good sex as it didn't hurt. And that's a problem, and that's what keeps me up at night. Like, I want to change this. I think everybody deserves just to have really satisfying sex, and when we have satisfying sex, we're just happier, we're more fulfilled, like our mental health is better. The thing that a lot of people don't realize is it's a skill just like anything else. And if I want to learn how to bake a cake or change a tire or hula hoop, like there's YouTube tutorials, there's coaches, there's like all of these resources out there. There's clear instructions on how to do it. Yet somehow in our society, like we think we're just supposed to know how to have sex without anybody teaching us and without us talking to anybody else. And I think that's the problem, and that really is what creates a lot of the shame and stigma that we have in our society around sex. I think investors are just nervous around, they don't know the space, right. They don't know what's gonna happen. It's so early in what we're trying to build that they can't pattern match, and they can't say like, oh, I've seen like this is gonna be a winner, this is not. And I think that's what holds them back.
What has the reception been so far? Because one thing to have a vision and start something and say, I'm going to make content now, and like, but it's another thing to see how well it is received and or not, and like where you need to pivot. And so how's that experience been so far?
It's been great. Yeah, my favorite thing about running a company is talking to customers and hearing what they say. And they say things like, I realized I've been giving a blowjob wrong my whole life. They say, I'm just happier now because I was finally able to talk to my partner and tell him what I wanted. And those stories, like that's what keeps me going at night when we get all the rejections, when we get all the no's, when we get our Instagram shut down. Like what our customers say to us about how this is really helping their lives, like there's nothing better in this world.
Say more on the Instagram.
Instagram is hugely censoring of sexual wellness, of sex educators, of anybody talking about sex. They keep up accounts that are teens in bikinis, but they won't let us even use like the hashtag sex or the word sex at risk of getting shut down. I'm speaking on a panel called The Future of Sex as Told by Women. When I posted that panel on Instagram, I had to say the future of segs, S-E-G-G-S, wow. Because I was worried about getting shut down and getting censored. I've never had segs. I know.
Sounds great though. There's no secret that this is a male-dominated industry in so many ways. You know, how have you come across the gatekeepers? And has there been opposition? Has there been any like weird looks or experiences with you being a female founder in this space? Like, what's that experience been like?
There's actually a lot of really cool women in the adult industry. A lot of people don't know that. It's not as much creepy dudes as you would think. I think the question, like the doubt comes in of people saying, why would people pay for something like this? It's silly because people will pay for something that makes their lives better. And Afterglow is doing something that's not just entertainment, it's actually helping people in, like, I almost say it's like a yoga studio, like an online yoga studio of sex. Like, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make a place you can go for sex that leaves you feeling really good.
As far as the future goes, what are you most excited about in your own category of femtech, sex tech, or maybe there's something else that you've seen out in the world you're like, oh my gosh, when that happens?
I'm super into women's medical research. I want there to be more women's medical research because so many studies were done just on men. Like the CPR dummies are only men, and because of that, women die each year. I'm in this tiny little sexual wellness space trying to help women have good sex, but like, you know, there's diseases where 20 years ago, people thought PCOS, which affects like 10% of women and gives them horribly painful periods, like that was just women complaining. I love learning, and I love learning about like sex and my body, and it's really brought just a lot of awareness, like for me personally, that really allows me to like be in tune with myself and be happier, be healthier, and live a better life.
I met with Gabrielle Evans, who is the co-founder of the Minority Sex Report, which is a sexual health platform that provides representation in sexual education. Gabrielle states that growing up in rural North Carolina, she didn't have much sex education, and none of it was taught by anyone who looked like her. So, she changed the narrative.
Specifically for Black and Native women, we know that Black women are hypersexualized. Native women are exoticized. We also know that doctors don't believe Black women when it comes to sexual pain or pain in general. With Native women, there's a lot of still stigma going with to the doctor just because of the history of forced sterilization during the 60s and 70s, 1960s and 70s, because a lot of people think it was far away. It wasn't.
That's severely recent.
Right.
So how does the actual education play out on the platform, and what's your day-to-day like when you are approaching these issues?
Both with the Minority Sex Report and then on my own end, there's a lot of educating providers who work with adolescents. So we've trained medical providers on like just how to talk to teens when they come into the office, or believe them and listen to them, and how to make it teen friendly and comforting. Also educating people on the reproductive trauma and the historical trauma that these populations have experienced. So I think those are the biggest things that we've been doing with education.
And so, you know, you mentioned earlier about like the doctors not necessarily using the language that the teens might use, especially in certain underserved communities, you know, and that message might not be received or resonated. Like, how do you work with the just communication in general, both from the on behalf of the woman and the medical professional?
I think it's important for the medical professionals to constantly, learn what the new terminology is, because I don't know too many teens who are going to go into the doctor and say, oh, my vulva or my vagina is doing like this. Although, it's important to teach proper terminology, but if they come in with another word, then you also need to be able to know, what they're talking about, or even if it's something, I don't know, maybe like a sex position or something, just still meeting them where they are. I'm constantly learning new terms.
Right.
My siblings laugh at me all the time because I'm the oldest, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. And it was like, you really are getting old. And I know when I first started working in HIV clinical research, I worked a lot with men who have sex with men. And they were shocked that I knew some of the terminology, in the community. And I'm like, y'all, like, I can be trusted. Like, I'm gonna like respect the barriers because I know that I'm a new person coming in, but I also I know some of the language, like I can chat with y'all, like we could talk about this.
I think you also, especially with today's teens, and I have one, so, I grew up on Two Live Crew, but when you're competing against a really rapid pace of culture, access to pornography, or, let's call it the music that might come out of, certain languages and things like that. How do you use that as a way in, or how do you keep up with those sorts of nuances?
So first thing that came to mind was like Meg Thee Stallion and Cardi B, using some of the terms that they use, you can pull lyrics out and use that in like a presentation or workshop to convey your message. So I think that's really important, especially like the cultural piece. And I know people have issues with, when they came out with WAP, it was like, oh, I don't want my kid to hear this. I was listening to Uchiwali as a little girl that I had no business listening to that song. So it's really no different. And I just think that there just need to be more inclusion of Native women. And going back to, us being treated like we're exotic, or, even going back to like the Pocahontas trope for Native women. not sexualizing us, but also knowing like, and this probably may sound redundant, I can still be sexual and not be treated like the Pocahontas type trope. So I think that finding that balance is important, and I really want to center sexual well-being and pleasure for Native women in particular. And then I also think the future of sex should be less stigmatizing when it comes to people living with STIs, because everybody deserves a pleasurable sex life.
This is like a new wave of women's empowerment, right? You know, the pornography and sexual education industries have been historically run by men. And here are two women who go like, no, that is absolutely not what we need to be saying and teaching and learning right now. And in fact, it goes a lot deeper than just a visual image or a brochure or, you know, an image on a chalkboard. So historically, there's been a lot of sexual trauma surrounding miseducation when it comes to sex and sexual wellness and mental health. And now we have a generation who's a lot more transparent, a lot more vocal, and has a lot more tools than any generation has ever had when it comes to just positive conversation, positive experiences, and being, you know, forthright with the information and the experiences that they have. And these two women are both catapulting us into a future where we can reduce the amount of issues that come from sexual experiences and also increase the pleasure and widen the lens on what's possible when it comes to such a taboo historically topic. I mean, every other industry has been revolutionized by tech, whether it's how you buy a car, what content you watch, how you connect with your friends, and why not sex and femtech, right? As far as the new wave of what's possible in educating and giving people access to positive experiences.